the last several months, Hamas has sort of rearmed, regrouped, and reorganized themselves to effectively retake control of most of Gaza. And that's because, for want of a better way of putting it, Israel took its foot off the gas and gave them room to breathe. And that is now creating a lot of issues for Israel, and of course the hostages. And so what they need to do now is go in and re-degrade Hamas and hopefully liberate some of the hostages, as many that might remain. My sense is that Hamas has learned over the last 7 months that much of the international community is either explicitly with them or sympathetic to them. And so these stalls in negotiations, these delays, like I mentioned earlier, have allowed them to regroup, to sort of recalibrate their strategy and their position. And so they've been very strategic over the last several months in shaping the information space, and they're doing that again now. I mean, Israel has repeatedly made what are, in my view, over the top concessions to Hamas over these last few months, and Hamas has repeatedly said no. And of course, now when a Rafah operation seems to be intensifying, they come out and spin more mis and disinformation. Israel is really between a rock and a hard place, to put it mildly. They're trying to appease, their international partners while also trying to secure the release of any remaining hostages and degrading Hamas. So, I mean, it's a very challenging situation. I think going forward, they're probably realizing that they have to go in and be more forceful. This is a very complex situation, and I think there's a sort of a rich history of these sort of dynamics between Israel and their international partners that is informing their decision making right now. But my sense is that leadership is starting to say to itself, okay, any remaining hostages that may be alive are almost certainly in a very dire situation. We can't any longer sort of negotiate and placate this terrorist group. We need to handle our business and handle it now. And I think that's sort of where we're starting to see things headed. How the international community responds, I mean, that remains to be seen. Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu, they've been here before, in the sense that, as you know, they've released tons and tons of prisoners, prisoners who have committed egregious crimes, for, in some cases, one soldier that's been held captive. It's important for people to remember that, yes, there are these factions in Israel politically, and socially and culturally as well. But at the end of the day, it is my view that, Jews and Israelis, they don't value anything more. Nothing is of greater value to them than life and their community and their citizens. And so, if they have to reach a deal that is not particularly palatable to, the right, or to other people who might not be happy with it, I believe at the end of the day, if they can secure as many hostages that are alive, which frankly, I hope I'm wrong, but I get the sense it's not a great number. I think that will do more, and that will, at the end of the day, sort of ultimately give every party in Israel what they want, and that is the release of these hostages. The Israeli Defense Forces have done more than any military in history to limit civilian casualties, despite the fact that people are baselessly calling this a genocide. It is absolutely absurd, and indeed it sort of leads to the term genocide losing its meaning, losing the gravity of that term. I have no doubt that what Israel is doing right now is precisely this. They're trying to limit civilian casualties. That's why they're saying, okay, this population in this part of Rafah, you need to get out of here because we're coming in. There's going to be bombs. There's going to be military activities. For your own safety, you need to get out of harm's way. They've been doing this since day one. They've been making millions of phone calls to citizens in Gaza, millions of text messages, dropping pamphlets, what they've just done recently, warning people to leave and in fact telling them where to go. They've been actually, to their own detriment, informing the people of Gaza of their military operations, when they're going to carry those out and where they're going to carry them out. I mean, if somebody can tell me of any other military in history doing this to limit civilian casualties, I'd like to hear it. And further, I don't ever recall a military in history, to the best of my knowledge, being responsible for providing food and aid and water and electricity and humanitarian goods to the same people who carried out an attack against them. I mean, the whole situation is absurd, and Israel is doing, in my view, an outstanding job at trying to sort of balance this situation. The levels of anti-Semitism that we've seen since October 7th is absolutely abhorrent. And much of this is proliferating and accelerating on university campuses. As somebody who teaches graduate classes here in Canada, I've been part of academia for the better part of 20 years. I can tell you that, this shouldn't really come as a surprise to people. Academics, scholars in international affairs and political science, they've been teaching students the wrong things when it comes to Israel. They've been breeding this hatred, for want of a better way of putting it. And now we are left with this. And people are standing around scratching their heads. I mean, when you teach people for decades that Israel is the enemy, that Israel is a colonizer, that it's an apartheid state, oh, the poor Palestinians. When you do this decade after decade, you're going to have these very destabilizing activities. And of course, it's leading to more Jew hatred. As I've said before, and I've talked about this on social media, October 7th was the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. And on October 8th, the world started sympathizing with and rallying around Palestinians. I mean, I can't stress how insane that is. And something needs to be done, and quickly, to put the anti-Semitism that we're seeing to rest, to snuff it out. Israel needs to achieve several things before the military can really pull back in any substantive way. And in my view, that includes securing not just the release of the remaining hostages who are alive, but all hostages held in Gaza, all bodies, including those that have been murdered and died in captivity. They have to decapitate Hamas leadership, including Sinwar, and they need to put in place an alternative to what has happened in Gaza the last decade or so, where you've seen Hamas use all of the resources, the billions of dollars that Western nations have sent to Palestinian territories, to mobilize and to carry out the attack that they did on October 7th. So all of these things need to happen before there can be a real withdrawal, and there needs to be a clear alternative in the future. You can't have an October 7th again, and Israel's going to make sure that won't ever happen again.